Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my week 22 and 23 reading wrap-ups. I was traveling last weekend and so I wasn't able to film one of these. If you'd like to see my vlog about where I was and who I met, I will make sure that I link that up above. But let's go ahead and dive right in. Couple things, as always, to start it off with is I have some patrons and a channel member to shout out. If you would like to support me here at the Book Refuge, I do this full time now, and I'm hoping that by the end of the year, this will have been productive for me and that I will end up making more money than I spend. We'll see. That's how it works, right? I have just been so blessed by y'all every single day, and I continue to be so surprised that I'm able to do this full time, and this is what I get to wake up to do. I actually had a friend reach out to me and ask if I, was needing employment, and I'm like, you know what, I think that I'm good for now. I mean, we'll see if it changes, but it's great. So one other thing before I do my shout outs, I am testing out a new mic, so please let me know how it sounds to you. I know sometimes that people struggle to be able to hear me when I'm only filming with my phone, so I'm testing out a wireless mic to see if it is improving the quality or not. I tend to not like, personally, how videos with a microphone sound. Like, I'm just being honest, I enjoy hearing just my sound, but I know for some people, like, you have to turn the sound up very high to be able to hear me. So we're going to test it out, and if it ends up working and if I end up liking this, it's great. I've already had one struggle with it where I plugged it in and thought I was going, but I forgot to turn this on, and I filmed an entire video without sound that I will have to redo. But I was like, I'm not redoing it right now. I'm going to film this and then we'll redo that later because I just can't. So there we go. But anyway, we're going to dive in and we're going to start with the patrons. So we have 5 new patrons to shout out. We have Paul Jeannette, and I'm sorry if I remember to pronounce any of these, I probably will. Haley Murray, Savannah Valagura, Carolina Jones, and Tracy Brown are all new patrons. So thank you so much for joining. It means so much to me. I hope you enjoy what you're able to glean out of it, and thank you for supporting my channel. And then we have a new channel member who is Romance Books and Budgets. Joined, I believe, at the Faded Friend level, and I'm very pleased to have you. So let's go ahead and dive in, because like I said, I have 19 books to talk about, and we know how bad I am when I only have 10. So we are going to dive in. I need to take a drink first. So in the few days the week before last, before I went to Georgia, I started a series by Cherise Sinclair. The series is called The Sons of the Survivalists. These books were gifted to me by Jilly Reeds, and so I was so happy to finally get around to reading them. I put Not a Hero on my TBR for May, and I ended up binging all 4 of these books in like 4 days. So yeah, it was amazing. This series is not a BDSM series. A lot of her books are, and I think that's part of the reason why I held off starting it. I don't know why. I love BDSM, y'all know that. But Cherise Sinclair has very intense, heavy level, by the book BDSM in her books, and sometimes that can just be not what I'm in the mood for, But this is not that. This is, I would describe it as light suspense, more of a small town romance. It is a small town in Alaska called Rescue, and Gabe is, I believe he's the oldest, but they were adopted / taken in a good way by this crazy ex-survivalist who basically rescued them all from a really bad situation in foster care. So these 4 boys, all from different backgrounds, but they all were in the same foster home in a very abusive place. And Miko just took them, and he took them to his backwoods cabin and taught them how to survive. They've all had some military experience, and now that Miko has passed, he's kind of left them with this weight of bringing Rescue Alaska back to life, because it has slowly been strangled by people moving away, And so they all have their part to play. So that's what the series is about. I don't want to get like too deep into it because, like I said, we got a lot of books to cover, and I have 4 books in this series just to talk about. But this first one is about Gabriel, and he just had like a rough go of something. He was a mercenary and some things went wrong, and now he doesn't want to like be around people. And his brothers are like, we've been given this task and you need to be the police chief until we can get someone else. So he gets hired to be the police chief. It's him and one other deputy, and a deputy who is not very like efficient at what he does. He kind of sucks at it. And then we have our heroine named, just says after a Chicago librarian. Is it, what name does she go by? I'm sorry, there's Audrey. Yeah, Audrey, who has got herself in a sticky situation. She's a librarian, and she uncovers a horrendous crime, and these hitmen come after her, and she barely escapes with her life, and she decides to run away to Alaska because that'll be a place to keep her safe, and then she ends up in rescue. And so this is a slow burn between these two. It's really great, and it really starts to build up what this series is going to be. So I love this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. I very much enjoyed it. And then right after that, I read Lethal Balance, which is about Cazador, whose name means hunter, and he's actually a nurse practitioner, and so he's the only like medical person in town. He was in the armed forces as well. Was he in the SEAL, or I'm not sure what he is, but anyway, he finds out in the beginning of this book that he has a daughter he had no idea about, and he's very like nervous about this. He's very like overwhelmed by the fact that he has a child that he didn't know about, and it's because he was in the army or whatever he was in, undercover, whatever he was doing. And the woman, when she reached out to let him know she had a kid by him from a one-night stand, he was like they said he was like dead basically, or they couldn't reach him. And now this woman has like died in prison basically, and he gets his kid. So lot to explain. So that's what's happening with Cazador. Then JJ, she's a female police officer who things are not safe for her in the town that she's living in. And so she gets a tip from a buddy that the hero from the first book, Gabriel, is looking for a deputy because some things go down in the first book where that deputy that we had was not so great. And so she gets hired, and she's very worried about how people perceive her. Women in law enforcement are not treated super well in her experience. And if they get any hint that like she is not an upstanding, like perfect person, things haven't been great for her. So when she has some feelings for Cazador, and then she finds out that he is a very prominent person in the town, and that also his brother is her boss, she's like, we can't have anything between us. But they are extremely attracted to each other. So this one continues on with everything. And I realized I didn't say spice levels. The first one had a 2.5 spice. So this one I gave a 4-star, and I also gave 2.5 for the spice, which was very interesting. Okay, so then we switched up. I read Stoneheart by Katie Robert. This, I had the arc of this from like before. Well, it wasn't even an arc, it was an early release because I'm one of her patrons. I didn't read it as an arc. This is sapphic, and it is between Medusa and Calypso, and Medusa is sent to kill Calypso, and Calypso ends up seducing her, and they end up like running away together. And this is like a prequel to the Dark Olympus series. I love this cover. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's only 80 pages long though. It was 4 stars, and it was only like a 2 on the spice scale, but it was pretty swoony. It was pretty steamy. It was a good time. Then I read Riley's Biker. I finished up what is out in this series so far, the Royal Bastards MC. This one is between Riley and Coyote. This one is also a secret pregnancy, but it was from a one-night stand when she was 17. She kind of lied about her age. Coyote is a loner with the packs, and actually Riley, her father, who's not her father, like too complicated to explain, he was the head of a different MC, a rival MC, and so the Sons of Cerberus. And when her father dies, she's kind of getting taken in by the Sons of Cerberus, and she has this young child who was from a one-night stand with Coyote, but she doesn't know that, like, that he's around still, and she kept it a secret because she didn't know, like, how to get a hold of him. And she'd stolen his cut, you know, their leather vest that they wear, and a biker only gets one of those. And so for the last, I think it's supposed to be like 5 years, he's been trying to find her again, and when he does, he discovers who she is and how she's related to the Sons of Cerberus, and he's very suspicious about if this was like a setup or not, or whatever. I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this whole series. I really did. They're a little bit wacky. They're actually very sweet, and they're very sexy. So this one was a 4.5 star for me, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. This one did have a violence, assault, and some blood and gore happening in this one. And those were the rest of the books I read in May. So now we're getting into June, but still last week. So then, like I said, I went back to this series, and this book, What You See, is book 3. By the way, I should say, listen to all of these books on audio because I got them during the series sale that Audible was having, and so I got them each for like $4. Because I gotta tell you, these covers may not be fantastic, but the audiobooks and the content of the book was amazing. So this one is about Bull, who is the owner of the bar in town. He also owns some other businesses in Alaska. He's very successful, and he's this fun-loving, wonderful man. And our heroine, her name is Frankie, and her family is actually in the fashion industry, but she has a best friend named Kit who lost her love in a freak accident. She has a very young son. He's only like 3 or 4. And her second marriage, she marries this man who is a part of a cult. Now, I haven't mentioned this cult up until now because they haven't been as big of a part of the story, but there's this cult that is on the outskirts of Rescue, and they're part of the reason why Rescue as a town was dying, because they've been scaring away anyone who would move to the area. And since our, you know, Sons of the Survivalists have been there, they've really kind of been able to tamp down on that. But Kit, she married this man who was a part of this cult, and she didn't know what she was getting into. So Kit is being abused and mistreated. And now Frankie is the godmother of her son. I can't remember the boy's name off the top of my head. I'll remember it soon because it's important later. But her friend writes to Frankie begging her to come and says, don't tell anyone, but come and take my son. I have like signed over guardianship to you. My husband was never able to adopt him. He doesn't belong to him at all because it isn't his kid. Please come and rescue him. Like, you won't be able to save me, but come and save my son. And so she takes a vacation from her job, and she goes to stay in this small town. She ends up being a waitress with Bull, and she's trying to figure out how to rescue Kit. Now, the big issue, though, is that in the letter, she says that one of the police officers is a plant from the cult. Now, that used to be true. Remember how I said in book 1, one of the police was bad news. He no longer is, but this letter that Kit had written was quite a few weeks old. So JJ's been there for a while now, but Kit doesn't know that. So Frankie, when she, you know, finds Bull and she's like very attracted to him, she finds out his adopted brother is the police chief, and then there's the police chief and JJ are the police in town, and she doesn't think that she can trust them with what's going on. So she's trying to do her own recognizance and try to figure out how to rescue her friend. And this is where the town really starts to step up in this series, and it becomes clear that this series, you really should be reading this series in order, and you really see how these men, what they have done, the work they're putting in, the time they're putting into this town, how it is paying them back tenfold. It's quite amazing. So that one, let me switch over here. That one I gave 5 stars, and it had a 2 on the spice scale. And there is cult violence and like family strife in this one. Also, there is hintings at what the assaults are that are happening to the women in the cult, but there's nothing like graphically depicted. She doesn't like push any of that on it. And then we got to the final book in the series, and that is Soar High. Man, I could cry just holding this book up, you guys. It's so good. So this one is about the last brother, Hawk. He is a scarred hero. He has PTSD. He is a damaged man. And we saw him come back around in, I think he comes back around in like book 2. And he's basically giving up mercenary work, and he's going to like be around. So he does like private charter flights is what he does, because he has a plane and a helicopter too. And so he will take like tourists who want to go like fishing or hunting. He'll like drop them off, make sure they have everything, and then like be their contact for in and out. In this book, this is a romance between him and Kit. So obviously it's a bit of a spoiler, but we do save Kit and her son. And again, I can't remember the little boy's name, but during her time of healing, because she was almost dead when they rescued her, the Patriot Zealots, that's the name of the cult, they had almost killed her. And so while she is being healed, her little boy is staying like with Hawk. So the thing I didn't explain about these is that the brothers, their homes are all like together. Their adopted dad, he had them build all their houses in kind of like this cul-de-sac type thing, but it's like within a compound, because like I said, he was a freaky survivalist. So there's literally underground tunnels between each place. There is their own like garden and their animals, like so that they can be self-sustainable. They have weapons and food. Like really, he was a crazy survivalist. That's why it's called Sons of the Survivalist. But that means that like, well, Kit was healing, Hawk, this grumpy, scary man, who they put a very tiny scar on him, like, and you can't even see it in this. There's a scar on him in here, but like part of his face is scarred, and he has a very rough voice because of something that happened to him as a kid. This young boy like bonds with him, and it's really beautiful. It's so touching. I just love it so much. And him and Kit, this is their romance. And there is this final big standoff against the Patriot Zealots, because now they're pissed off that this small group of like people were able to like take them down. And so this is the final culmination of getting to see how everything they put into this town, how much this town loves this family, and they see them as their own, and that they will go to death for them. And it's so beautiful. Like seriously, this series is quiet in so many ways. Like there are some big action things in here, but for the most part, like I said, there's usually like a mystery or suspense in each one. The romances are usually slow burn, but very beautiful. There still is sex, and there is like the graphic sex, but as you see, it's more around my like 2 or 2.5 for these. Like this one's 2.5. This one has very much like healing situations. Hawk, who has been through sexual trauma himself when he was young, is good at being very like calm and slow for Kit. And it's just so good, you guys. It was so good. I gave this 5 stars. And again, it's 2.5 on the spice scale. The trigger warnings were there is people who've survived abuse in here. There's childhood trauma. There was a domestic abuse, and there are mentions of the rape that happened. But again, there's not really anything graphic about that. If that's something that bothers you, I think this is done very well. So I freaking love those. And I know people are going to point it out. Yes, I do know this is connected with the Masters of the Mountain and I can't remember it, but the other Sex Club series, because Master Z, he is a therapist who had helped these men when they were boys get through a lot. And we do see him and his wife show up in these books at different times. And the series actually cross over near the end of Masters of the Shadowlands. So it's very cool. And I definitely want to continue reading Cherise Sinclair. I know she gets brought up in my list quite a few times, and I do want to. The issue for me is that none of her books are in the libraries that I have access to. None of her books are in KU. I have to purchase all of them if I want to read them. And her books aren't like $2.99. They're like $5.99 each, which good for her. Her books deserve it. but there is like 12 books in the one series, 10 books in another series. Like, it's expensive. So I want to read her books. I just have to take my time because that's a lot, especially when a lot of them are repetitive. Like, these books weren't repetitive, but in Masters of the Shadowlands, like, I'd read 4 of her books and they all got like very repetitive. But I do know that some people's favorites in the series are like way far in the series. So, all right, we got to keep going. So I then read a new release, Sweet Berries by C.M. Nacasta. This I don't have a ton to say about. This is the next book in her like monster romance series. So it comes after Morning Glory Milking Farm. But I loved this cover, and this one, I did not have the same problems reading this one because the hero is a Mothman, and he's not, he didn't remind me of any dairy farm creatures that I knew as a child. So this one was fun. It's actually a voyeuristic is how it starts out. Our heroine is masturbating in her bed with like it's at night, but like she hears someone outside and she ends up kind of performing for them. And it ends up being our hero who then comes to see her at her work, and he's there to like apologize for spying on her. But she really liked it. And they end up dating after a while. And so it was quick. It was sweet. It's again a case of like literally in the beginning, she's like, this is just going to be high heat monster smut. And I wouldn't call this like super high heat. I mean, it's still a novella, and it was like slow burn for being a novella. Okay. So C.M. Nacasta, my love, I don't know what's high heat to you. I mean, it was hot. I'm not saying it's not hot, but she was like, this is only smut. And I was like, it was one of the sweetest little monster things I've ever read. So there's that. I gave it 4 stars, but it's a 3 on my spice scale. So there we go. All right. Then I read One Night in Garro Reeve by L.M. Drew. This book was a TikTok recommendation I saw. This author, I really liked how she talked about plus size women in her TikToks, and like, she writes like big plus size women, so I really like that. And this heroine, this is she is like running away from her life basically. She lost her job, left her man like cheated on her, he's a total asshole, and she gets sucked into this town called Garro Reeve, which is like a werewolf town or shifter town, and she's fated mates with the alpha of the pack, whose name is Colburn. Her name is Ariana. They have like a one-night stand, but then she keeps being drawn to stay there, and this is a magical town that like shows up when you need it. So like she leaves the town, and then when she tries to come back, she can't remember how she got there, but the town just appears when she wants to go there. And yeah, so it's kind of like a insta-lust with her werewolf man. And I don't know, my issue with this is that I like the representation of the heroine, but she has a lot of body issues and a lot of like bad eating habits, and it was just like, it was a bit of a struggle. And I don't think the story was like well laid out, which maybe will be better in future books, and I would probably keep reading it for the plus size representation, so we'll see. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was a 4.5 on the spice scale though. Whew, very hot. Then I read a fanfic called Master Chef by Fragile Reality. This was a Lucius Malfoy and Hermione Granger. This one was an age gap, enemies to lovers, and there was some like dynamic play in here. It was pretty hot. He like made her squirt at one point, and I'm always like, whew, when that happens, I'm here for it. This is a Lucius. He is like a divorced man at this point, and Hermione's actually friends with Draco in this one, and she's giving him like cooking lessons randomly, and Lucius decides that he wants to sleep with her because he thinks she's gorgeous and he wants to sleep with her. So he asks her for cooking lessons, and he tries to seduce her into being with him. And like, it was okay. This story, as sometimes happens with fanfics, it didn't really have a clear like lane where it was going for, so it got a bit messy, but it was pretty hot. So this was a 4-star for me, and I gave it a 3.5 on the spice scale. And I said a reason not to recommend, I was like, Lucius is a bit over the top. He does lie and do a lot of sneaking around, but he does have to grovel real hard. Then I read Beautiful Distractions by Lydia Michaels. I am slowly making my way through her backlist of books. And this one is a plus-size heroine book that I thoroughly enjoyed. Okay, so one of the things that I said about this one is that this book won't work for everyone, and not just because not everyone wants to read plus-size characters. A lot of people will say that this heroine has like a damaging mental state, and that the hero maybe is a bit too forceful with his like acceptance of her. And I know that sounds weird, but he is sometimes kind of like, why are you doing this to yourself kind of thing. Sometimes he gets over that because he understands her better. But anyway, our heroine Mallory, and I'll explain what I meant in a second. She moves to this small town to find herself. She was in kind of an emotionally abusive relationship before, and it just like, it wasn't good to her. And she has been told by her doctor that she's not healthy. And she wants to change that. So she moves to this small town. She moves away from her parents, although her parents are loving. They're not very helpful with the losing weight thing. So she gets a job. I think she's a teacher or like an aide at the school. And this is McCullough Mountain. So there's the McCulloughs there and everything. And she meets Finn McCullough, who at the beginning of this has a girlfriend, but they become really friendly and they literally become buddies to begin with. And pretty soon along, he ends up breaking up with his girlfriend because she's the only woman he's ever been with. His first girlfriend. He's only been with her since high school. They've been together. But he's never felt the urge to like settle down with her. Like it's just hasn't been there. And she's kind of a bitchy, cruel person. And so he ends up breaking up with her because she's not nice. And then him and Mallory, things really get going. But she's very shy and self-conscious. And he's just so into her. But it's hard for her to let that go. And there are some painfully gorgeous sex scenes in this where like there's somewhere they're like making out and he just wants to like touch her and she's just not comfortable with it. And then there's the first time they're going to like get naked and he's like, she, wants to turn off the lights and he's like, we won't be doing that. Like, I want to see you. And sometimes that can feel like I wish he would work through it with her instead of being like, it's my way with the lights on or it's no way at all because I just can't. And that was uncomfortable, but it was so good. Like it was so good where it was going. Okay. And now what I want to say about why Mallory like worked for me so well. I completely related to what she was going through because I too had a doctor tell me I was unhealthy, but I also knew it. And so if some of you have been my buddies for a long time on here, 4 years ago, I started a program because I was feeling very overwhelmed with my weight. And I started, a dietitian, a personal trainer, and a doctor that I was seeing weekly and monthly for a year. And a lot of people will say like, oh, but you're so beautiful or oh, this or whatever. And I know people don't mean it as a backhanded compliment. I know people don't mean it as like degrading or anything, but sometimes it doesn't have to do with if you feel beautiful or not. Like, I mean, I would be self-conscious about body parts. Heck, I'm still going to be. Like, I've lost 80 pounds, Like, yeah, I'm self-conscious. But I was never doing it because I wanted to look prettier. And that's something that Mallory has to, like, kind of explain that I want to feel better. I want to live longer. I want to be able to have kids. Like, that is literally me. And so to have a hero who was so affirming of her, and those sometimes, like for me, as a big woman who is losing weight, I would be like, dude, it's not the point whether you think she looks okay. I mean, that's great. That's helpful, but that doesn't make your, PCOS better. If that's not what she has, but that's what I have. Like, that doesn't make your blood sugar better because you think I look nice. Like, I still needed to make changes to be healthy. So I really felt that with Mallory. So I know why this won't be for everyone. But also, if you're someone who has like struggled with your weight or you have lost weight and you still don't feel perfect about yourself, like I think this is really powerful. Like I was very moved by this book. So I did give this one 4 stars because it just wasn't super enjoyable all the time, but I so much related to it and I don't know. I might move it to 5 stars. Oh, I remember why I didn't. Wait. It didn't have to do with loving that. The third act conflict that happened, I thought Mallory was being really dumb. There we go. That's what it was. Because it was actually like the plus size stuff, the health situations, like her becoming more active and being able to do things. Like, that's totally me, and I loved it. But like, there is a misunderstanding in third act that I was like, Lydia, what the hell? Like, that didn't need to happen. I thought our heroine and our hero were in a place where she shouldn't have had that issue. So yeah, it was 4-star, and I gave it 3 on the spice rating. It was really good. Definitely know that if you're sensitive to, like, you know, changing your eating habits and working out and like not feeling great about yourself, like, this will be tough. But for me, I felt very seen by the book. Okay, we got to keep moving. I read Give Me More by Sarah Kate, and honestly, I'm not going to talk too much about it. Because number one, everyone and their sister is reading this book. They're going to read this book. This series by her keeps getting better and better. I know I'm going to talk about this book more because I gave it 6 stars. Let's just lay it down. This is an MMF, and this is the MMF that I dream of reading. I want more. Give me more. Like, I want more of this. This is a married couple, Hunter and Isabel, and Hunter starts to discover that he may have a desire to watch his best friend with his wife, but particularly his best friend with his wife. He starts looking into what the terms like cuckolding means, or what that is, and he starts to be very attracted by it. And there's this scenario where in this book, Hunter, Isabel, and Drake are traveling to different sex clubs to do research because Hunter owns part of the sex club, and they're wanting to, you know, add some different rooms or different acts to their program. And there's a situation where Drake is actually doing like a sharabi demonstration with Isabel, because like they get called out of the crowd to do it, and he comes back into the room as Drake is like slamming her down on a thing and then like pulling her to him, and he gets very turned on by it, like super hot by it. And so he suggests that they try it, and both Isabel and Drake are like, what are you doing? You're gonna ruin everything. But the more that Hunter explains why he's interested and what it does to him, they become more willing. Now, the thing is, Drake is bisexual. Drake has had feelings for Hunter for a very long time. And Isabel can see that. Drake can see that. Hunter doesn't see that. So asking Drake to fuck his wife and like be in the room with it isn't completely fair to Drake. And also, Drake is like, am I supposed to not have any feelings? Because Hunter is like, I mean, you're my best friend. Like, you're able to fuck people without feelings all the time. And he's like, yeah, because I don't care about them. Like, you and Isabel are the most important relationships in my life, and you're asking me to risk that for us to like have a sexy experience. Especially when Drake knows there's no chance of anything like with the 3 of them. But that starts to change. Like, it changes. And the way that Sarah Kate has this working out, and the realizations that Hunter is coming to as he goes through this book, this is a beautiful book for Pride Month. Like, I'm just going to say this. Like, the bi awakening that Hunter goes through and the demons of his past he has to deal with. The really only major trigger warning in this book is the homophobia in Hunter's past. Like, we get flashbacks of his father, who was very cruel and beat him and was very homophobic and just disgusting. So that's kind of a trigger warning in here. And there's a lot of Hunter like having to work through, not that he thinks other people shouldn't have the feelings they want to feel, but he's trying to work through how he can rationalize the new feelings he has. So the thing I'll say about this, and what makes Sarah Kate's MMF different than many I've read, is that, number one, she starts them all at a really great place. Like, you can tell these 3 have been friends for a long time. And Drake and Hunter, they've been friends forever. And Isabel, she's been friends with them for 10 years. And Isabel and Hunter, they've been married for like 7 of those, but they've been together for 10 years. And that's where we start. And Sarah Kate does a brilliant job of showcasing all 4 relationships that are important for a menage. You have the married couple, you have Isabel and Drake, who are like a friends to lovers, you know, like they know the other person's attractive, but it's never went any further than that. And so they're discovering their attraction to each other. And then there is the slow burn friends to lovers between Hunter and Drake, which is also a like bye for you situation. And then there's the relationship of the three of them. And that's the one that I think gets forgotten by a lot of authors. And I fully believed all four relationships and how they work together. And the scene in this book where Hunter is fully able to come into who he is, I wept, okay? There is a third act breakup in this, and I'm using this because it isn't really a breakup, but there is like a separation that happens, and it is one of the few times where even though I was screaming at my Kindle and it hurt my guts for this to happen, that it definitely had to happen. Sarah Kate was 100% right, because there are things that needed to be worked through that couldn't be if all three of them are still together for that. But it's done very quickly, and the revelations that happen were very important. So that's enough. We're going to talk about this book many more times because it's a 6-star book, which means I'm going to talk about it till your ears fall off. It's my favorite book in the series, and I can't wait for there to be more of them. So this was 6 stars, and it was 4 on the spice scale. And one other thing I wanted to say, because I think that Sarah Kate's books, particularly, because they're very hot right now, absolutely they are, they deserve to be, I feel like the sexy quotes are what get shared all the time about her books. I feel like the kinky things are what get shared all the time. But in both Eyes on Me and Give Me More, it was the emotional stuff that hit me more than that. And I'm almost sad that only the spicy scenes are what people show. Like, people put the quote up like, I want to watch you fuck my wife. That is literally putting this book down to its most base form. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm telling you, this book has depth. It is very deep. It has lots of emotions and complicated things. And Sarah Kate is able to take you with it with a precision touch, okay? All right, we got to move along because we got a lot to go. Okay, I read Because of You by Stein048. This was a Dramini fanfic. I will talk about this one really quickly. This one is a scenario that it's taking place 10 years after the Battle of Hogwarts. Draco has already done time in Azkaban. Hermione has just gotten a divorce from Ron. And Harry has actually given Draco Hermione's phone number because Draco wanted to reach out to Hermione and thank him because she stopped him from siding with Voldemort during the final battle. And so he did go to Azkaban, but he only went there for a couple of years, and he was able to change his life around. So he's reaching out to Hermione to thank her, and they start a texting relationship that becomes a sexting relationship that becomes a relationship. And it's through the machinations of some of their friends that it happens. And I really love this. It had a few too many flashbacks and a few too many POVs of other people, but I really enjoyed it. And this one was a 4.5 stars and a 4 on the spice scale. And mental health is a bit of a trigger in this one. Then I have a DNF, which I'll talk about very quickly. I was very disappointed because this was another book I was reading for Pride Month, and it was Higher Education, and it's by Kai Brightly and M.D. Gregory, and this was going to be an amazing book. Okay, this was going to be amazing. This is a gay romance between a law professor and a student, and the student is the dominant, and he actually gets himself put into this professor's class because they have a one-night stand at a gay club, and our hero, he had just been broken up with by his longtime boyfriend, who had cheated on him and is with a younger man now, and he feels devastated. This man also stole most of his retirement money, and it's so sad. So I think he's 42, and so then our hero is 21 or 22 or something, and he's a dominant, and he ends up after having this one night stand, he finds out who this guy is, he stalks him, becomes a part of his class, and is determined to make him his bitch. And he literally tells him that. He's like, you're going to be my bitch again. I love watching you take my cock. And the problem that I had and why this is a DNF, because this was pretty hot. Started off hot and heavy. And I had some issues too with the BDSM done, because it would be one thing if they weren't having BDSM conversations. But at one point, the younger hero was like, we need to have a safe word and we need to have this and whatever. But like they'd already started BDSM and he just like demanded that the guy let him choose his clothes and decide what his food is going to be and like all this stuff. And I was like, wow, we didn't have any safety conversations. We just jumped into this. And then the words that it used started to make me feel very icky, okay? There was the terms used, you're going to take my ball juice. Yep. And then there was a scene after they worked out where he's like, I want you to lick the sweat off my balls. Now, some of that might be hot, and I'm not judging anyone's kink. I never would. But I felt gross with those words. And every time I tried to go back in, I would see one of them, and I just had to back out of it. So there was nothing wrong with this story, but it made me feel very icky, so I DNF'd it. It is a 5 on the spice scale. So if you would like the dirty, nasty talk, again, no shame to you, I say you give it a try. I did check up some other books by these authors, and I think I'm not the only one because quite a few people were like, what the fuck? So there we go. Then we're moving along. I read The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I won't be talking in depth about this book because this was a Patreon pick. There is an exclusive review of this video available to my patrons. I did a 20-minute like in-depth thoughts on this book. This is the first book in the Dreamland Billionaires. The relationship is between Rowan, who is one of the like grandsons of the owners who's died, and then there's Zara, who currently works in like the kind of like the version of the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, but because Dreamland is Disneyland, and she ends up submitting a plan for a new ride, and he ends up plucking her out of her job and making her a creator. It's a grumpy sunshine. It's an office romance. I gave it 4 stars, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And if you'd like to know more in depth, you can join at the $7 level on my Patreon to find the reviews for that. Also, okay, so then I read a bunch of novellas. So let's blow through these because we're keeping it going today. Lots of books. I read Don't Tell Me No. This was a sapphic novella by Honey Channel. Yep, the name of this lesbian erotic author is Honey Channel. This was a taboo sapphic romance where this woman, Hadley, I think is her name, or is her name Rhea? I'm not sure who's who. But her husband stole a bunch of money from his company, and when the boss finds out, she makes a deal that if his wife will be hers for 6 months, she will forget about it and let it go. And our heroine knows that it's because this woman wants to sleep with her. She's been eyeing her up for months, and this is like the chance. And so she agrees, and part of her contract is she's not allowed to say the word no. She does still have a safe word, so it's like she does kind of have a no like version, but she's not allowed to say no. So it was hot, but like the writing was not great, so it's like there'd be hot sex scenes, but I don't know what was happening. But there's also group lesbian scene in here. It's all smut. Literally the beginning of the book is like, this is straight up lesbian erotica. Here you go. So there you go. It was a 3.5 star and 4 on the spice scale. Then I read Savage in the Touch by Melina Jax. By the way, both Don't Tell Me No and Savage in the Touch, they were just in a recent Kindle tour that I did. And you can tell that I read a bunch of those books right away because after doing that video, I wanted to dive into them. So this one was like a fantasy / like monster fated mate. It's only a novella. Andy, she's working at a pub or like a bar, and these monsters are coming through, and like they can mostly look as man, but they like shift parts of themselves. I don't fully know what they look like, whatever. But he discovers she's his fated mate. They're like carnivorous monsters too, so they will like eat whatever they come across, so that's a thing. But he realizes she's his fated mate, so he takes her and her sister and makes them travel with him, and he's planning to breed her and make her his. I was interested a little bit, but like the story was just not well set up for this, in my opinion, and it was a very slow burn for it being a novella. I know I say very, but you know, so I don't know. It was a lot. Also, there was lots of threatening to fuck her. And he's like, you're going to want it when I do it, but like, I'm going to fuck you. And I'm like, okay, all right. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And then the last novella I ran through was Handsome Devil, and this was by Sarah Kate. This was a part of the Cocky Heroes Club, and I had an audiobook for this one. It was only like 150 pages. It's a best friend's dad romance. It's a road trip. There's a snowstorm, and Layla's friend is going to get married in Vegas, and her dad, Henry, who's British, by the way, so the audiobook was quite pleasant. He's a doctor, and he wants to stop his daughter from getting married. So they do a cross-country road trip together, her to be there for the wedding, him to try to stop the wedding, and they end up having sex along the way. This is also, she's a virgin, and she wants to, like, have her first time be really good, and he's like, your first time's not going to be good, and she's like, what if it's with someone like you? So it was a sex trip. That's what it was. It was fun. I gave it 4 stars, 3 on the spice scale. Then I did a reread of Witches Get Stitches by Juliet Cross. This was a patron pick, so that was really fun. One of my patrons wanted an annotated copy of this, and I really enjoyed rereading this book. I actually rated it higher than I did the first time. I listened to the audiobook because I hadn't the first time around. I'd read an arc of this book originally too, so that's cool. But this one is about Violet and Nico, and Violet is the tattoo artist, and she runs Empress Inc., and Nico is her business partner, and Nico knows that she's his mate, but she believes that they are doomed for disaster, so she very much keeps him at an arm's length from her, but he's very persistent, and he is going to win his woman, and it's delightful watching him do this. Juliet writes such great banter, such great family dynamics, super sexy smut. This was delightful. It was so sexy. So this was a 5-star book, and this was a 4 on the spice scale. These books are also very low angst. Like, there's always a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of drama going, but like, the angst is very low for the relationship wise. They're just so good. So good. And then the last one I want to talk about is Revved to the Max by Melanie Moreland. I heard about this book in a Facebook group that is Claire Kingsley's Facebook group, and someone said that this hero gave them Evan Bailey vibes, and having read it now, I 100% agree. This absolutely gave me Evan Bailey vibes. This man, Max, owns a restoration garage where he restores like cars and motorcycles, and the year before he'd had his girlfriend and best friend betray him and leave his business and his personal life in disarray, and he's encouraged by his friend to hire an assistant. So he puts an ad out on a job website looking for a girl Friday, but he means that in the term of like someone to be his everything. He's not necessarily looking for a woman, but he needs someone who can help with his housework and food, as well as be able to handle business things, because he's not the best with like keeping the books up to date and all of that stuff. And so our heroine, Charlie, she's just been left in a really dangerous situation because her roommate has been stealing her rent checks and actually trading sexual favors with the landlord for rent. And now that person has stolen all of her stuff and left her. And so the landlord is expecting her now to pay for the rent, and she doesn't have anything. She's been wiped clean. So she sees this advertisement to be someone's girl Friday, and she knows he thinks she's a man based on like how she's like, wow, that's kind of sexist of you to say you're looking for a woman to do this. And he's like, well, it can be a man. Girl Friday is just a term or whatever. And she goes like by the nickname Charlie, even though her name is Charlene. So she ends up taking a bus there, and he's going to pick her up because this is also for a live-in assistant. Like, she's going to live above the garage. There's an apartment there, and the garage is like his house is like behind his workplace or whatever. And so the night before he's supposed to pick her up, she's staying at a motel in town, and he's at the bar, and they end up meeting at the bar, and we discover that he's 37, she's 25, so there's, you know, it's an age gap that doesn't matter too much in the scheme of things, but he's just, look at this cover, like, he's so hot and big and rumbly, and it's so great, and they end up having a one-night stand, and he's not looking for anything after having his heart broken, and she, you know, goes to get picked up, and it's him. And so he immediately feels betrayed and feels like she lied, and she's like, how could I have known, like, you said your name was Reynolds, and like, I didn't know, and I knew you were looking for a, you know. So anyway, it starts them off on a bad foot, and he's like, I'm only going to give you 2 weeks to prove it, and blah, blah, blah. So this was great. It's kind of like small town, and ends up being kind of found family too, because throughout the book, we like hire more people to work at the garage, and the next couple books are going to be about those guys. And it's just Charlie and him like having this slow burn. They have it so much sexual chemistry, like, big part of the reason why he doesn't want her to work there is he knows he's going to keep having sex with her, and he knows that his heart's going to get involved, and he doesn't want that. But it's pretty low angst. He very much like hates when she wears sexy outfits, and they end up banging in the garage quite a few times, and it was delightful. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was great. I gave it 5 stars, and it's a 3.5 on the spice scale, because the drama at the end did not have to do with relationships. So I was very happy about it. So, whew, there we go. I made it through all 19 books in under an hour, just barely. Sorry if that was a bit too quick for what I do, but I had to get us caught up to date. So next week we'll be back to the normal like 10 or 12, right? So thank you so much for watching this. Let me know if you think the audio was better. I will listen back to it and see what I think. I'm very self-conscious of it being down here. I want to make sure it gets picked up, so we'll see what happens. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my generous patrons and channel members for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!